John McKinley, International Director of Children's Ministries for the Church of God of Prophecy, and I want to welcome you to tonight's CM Live webinar. We have an extraordinary lineup of speakers with us tonight. I'm sure that you will enjoy each presentation and you'll be inspired, equipped, and challenged to grow as a leader and a minister to kids. Throughout the night, we will be taking your questions as each presenter shares. If you have a question to ask or a comment to make, please do so using the chat box located on the right of your screen. We would love to hear from you. How about we begin the conversation right now by entering your name and where you're watching from. I'd like to also encourage you to bring others into this conversation by using social media. This webinar is being streamed live on our Facebook page, where you can share it with your friends, pastor, and other volunteers. While you're at it, we would love for you to share a photo of you and your ministry team participating in this webinar. So why not go ahead and snap a photo and post it on Facebook or Twitter. Be sure to use the hashtag CGPKids. We'll be back in just a moment with our first presenter of the evening. I am thrilled to welcome our first presenter this evening. As someone who served for years as a children's minister in small churches, I was personally inspired, equipped, and impacted by the writings of Dr. Rick Chromey. I am grateful that he agreed to share with us this evening as our first presenter in the new year. Dr. Rick Chromey is the founder and president of Manna Educational Services International. He's a popular trainer and speaker on church and culture, generational analysis, creative teaching, classroom management, and children's ministry leadership. He's the author of over a dozen books, including Thriving Youth Ministry in Smaller Churches and the soon-to-be-released Gen Tech, an American story of technology, change, and who we really are since 1900. For more information about Dr. Chromey, you can visit his website at mannasolutions.org. Welcome, Dr. Chromey. Thank you for being with us.
It's good to be here, Sean. Thank you for that introduction. I think of all the introductions I've ever received, that was the most recent one. So thank you.
Oh, good. Good. Well, we really are just thrilled to have you with us tonight. And again, I can't thank you enough for your early, I guess one of your earlier books on children's ministry in the small church.
Yeah, I actually wrote my first book, Youth Ministry in Small Churches, back in 1990, and then followed up with a children's ministry version in 1995. And nobody was writing about children's ministry in the smaller congregation. And it's something that always was a part of who I was and the work that I did. And I just appreciate the opportunity God has given me over the years.
Yeah, well, it was a wonderful resource for me just starting out in children's ministry, and a great tool that I've gone back to even all these years later. So I want to personally thank you for that book. But thanks again for being here tonight. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Good to be here.
So take it away.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. All right. Well, tonight we're going to be looking at thriving children's ministry in the smaller church. And I don't have a lot of time. In fact, my time is a bit small, so I'm going to focus on just some key ideas and thoughts for you tonight. First of all, I want to key in on the idea that small is tall in our culture today. I mean, think about driving in a traffic jam or traffic. In fact, I was in LA just a couple of weeks ago, and I got to tell you, traffic in LA is always interesting. But there is one vehicle that has no problem in the busy traffic, and that is that motorcycle. And yeah, I mean, everybody else can be stalled and stuck and going slow, but that motorcycle is just zooming in and out between lanes and going faster and further than any of us are doing in our vehicles. And that got me thinking a lot about churches, in fact. Because when you think about it, in our culture today, big is often considered better. But the truth of the matter is, in a very nimble and fragile and really fluid culture that we have that can get stuck and stalled at many times because there's just so much movement going on, as a cultural metaphor, I find that small is tall. Small has distinct advantages. You can move quicker again. You can change much more fluidly. And it's just a huge advantage that we have. If you're not totally convinced yet that small is tall, then I can ask you to consider Starbucks. If you go into a Starbucks and order a tall coffee, what do you get? You get small. That's right. And that is a great metaphor for where we're going in our time together. Because one of the things I really want to encourage you, other than understanding it's small is tall, and in fact, I want you to think that it's not just small, it's smaller. Too many times we communicate through our vocabulary that we're small. You know, we have small budgets and small staff and small attendances and small buildings. But the truth of the matter is, if you think small, you're going to get small every single time. So I want to encourage you as a volunteer or children's ministry leader, Sunday school teacher, whatever your capacity is in children's ministry today, that you think smaller, not small. Think smaller. And to do that, I want to encourage you to also think different. Be different. Be different in how you're doing it. In fact, let me just give you just some things to hang your hat on when it comes to church growth. And really, I don't like that word church growth. I prefer to focus in on church health. I believe if you're healthy as a church, you will grow, and there's natural things that will happen, consequences of a healthy church. But you can be a large church, a very mega church, and be unhealthy, be dysfunctional. So here's just a few things to think about. First of all, the 200 barrier as far as attendance in church growth or in churches today, that's a reality. Most churches will never break the 200 barrier. In fact, about 75 to 80% of all churches are under 200 in active attendance on a Sunday morning or weekend attendance. Secondly, a church that doesn't reinvent and reproduce will eventually die. I think we get that. A healthy church is a growing church, and a growing church is going to be one that can reproduce and reinvent. So that's key. And a lot of the things I'm going to share with you tonight are things that you can really put in your back pocket for those reinvention and reproduction moments. Third, a church doesn't need to be larger than 200 to be blessed by God and effective in ministry. Amen? I mean, amen to that. We don't have to be large to have success and effectiveness. What we need to do is just be faithful to what God is doing and what God wants to do within our smaller context. And then finally, dynamic smaller churches, regardless of size, and growing churches, also regardless of size, they nearly always have children's and youth ministry as a congregational priority. I say nearly always because I always leave room for the exception there. But in my own observation, over 30 years of church analysis and observation, I can actually say from my perspective, it's always. If you have children's and youth ministry as a priority, that's a sign of a dynamic and healthy growing church congregation. Let me give you a thought here when it comes to Scripture, because we really need to ground everything we do in Scripture. And I love this words from Jesus. He says in Matthew 17, verse 20, I tell you the truth, if you have faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. I don't know if you can underscore that at all where you're at, but nothing would be impossible. You see, the problem is today in smaller churches is we see the obstacles, not the opportunities. We see the problems, not the possibilities that are out there. And I want to encourage you to be thinking, it's kind of like that iceberg. Often we see the tip of the iceberg and we look at that problem, we're going, wow, we don't realize that underneath the water, there's all sorts of possibilities there for us to, again, be nimble and be fluid, be able to change and alter our course. When you think about the smaller church, I mean, let's be honest, there are obstacles, are there not? I mean, that's part of the issues of working in a smaller congregation. And I've identified basically 4 here, and you see it on your screen, that are just obstacles that are common ones that I hear when I talk to smaller church children's ministers and youth workers and leaders. First of all, just a lack of volunteers. Just a lack of volunteers. We just don't have enough staff. And really, when you think about it, ideally, there's a rule of thumb in ministry that if you have 5-year-olds, for example, you need 1 staff for every 5 children. If you have 10-year-olds, you need one staff for every 10 children. So that rule of thumb, that span of control, as we would call it in the staffing area, it's often a problem. In fact, many of us in smaller churches, we don't even have enough to have team teachers in the classroom and in our ministry context. And that's really a key. I always say, try to at least get to have two people. You need at least a team. Not only is it easier to recruit to that, but also it's important just for protection and security measures and such. There's also the financial shortage. I mean, when you think about it, the average church today, only brings in so much money. And in fact, when you look at it, it doesn't matter what size you are. The offerings just get bigger the bigger you are, but the needs change. And in a smaller congregation, a lot of our money, a lot of our resources financially go to staff and to facility. I mean, we've got to pay the mortgage on the building, or we got to pay the staff their salaries. And so it becomes very difficult for us to add on, especially for a church of 200 or 300, just to keep that momentum. Often it is a real problem that as you try to grow through the 200 barrier, that you're met with facility constraints and staffing constraints. And usually you have to choose one of those two paths. And if you don't do it the right way, it almost always backfires on you, and you swell to a certain point, and then you come back down because you don't have the facilities. You have the staff, but not the facilities, or you have the facilities, but not the staff. It's just a double-edged sword. And smaller churches know that more than any of them. And it's just a natural part of our work. And then there's no and low attendance. I mean, let's think about that for a moment. A lot of times, what happens when you have very few kids show up? I mean, you planned and planned and planned and promoted and promoted and promoted, and very few children show up for this event, or no one shows up. I was actually in that particular situation once where I was taking, in this case, it was teenagers. We were taking them shopping for Christmas, and we were going to a mall on the other side of the river down there. This was in southern Ohio. We were headed out to northern Kentucky, and I had like 20 kids, teenagers, all signed up for this event, and I was there ready to go on that Saturday morning, and nobody showed. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. There was one teenage girl that showed up. And it was then that I put into practice a principle that I'd like to share with you at this point. And that is simply this: don't count the kids, make the kids count. And that's what I did that day. I mean, I realized, hey, we're small. We don't need a church van for this trip today. So we basically changed everything around. I called up the parent and said, hey, do you mind if we make some changes and stay in touch and do a different route here? We've only got just your daughter going with us. And sure enough, she was fine with that. Parents are fine. And so instead of going to the mall with a bunch of kids, we went to downtown Cincinnati in this case and walked around the downtown area and shopped down there, because that was where this particular teenager had always wanted to go. She lived in the country. She'd never been to downtown Cincinnati. And I was able to treat her to that special moment in her life, a moment that she still talks about even to this day. And it's just something that is unique. And that's what I'm talking about. I realize no and low attendance is a tremendous issue. It's a tremendous obstacle, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, think about all the great studies you can have, Bible studies you can have that are outdoors in small places. I mean, if you're studying the story of Zacchaeus, the best place to study it might be in a tree. Well, you can't do that with 30 kids. You can't do that with 20 kids. You shouldn't probably do it with 10 kids. And maybe even 5 kids would be difficult. But if you have just a few, the fewer the better. Think outside the box when it comes to this area. Finally, facility constraints. I mean, I got to be honest, facilities restraints have been a part of my small church experience, my smaller congregation experience from the very beginning. I remember my very first church. They were so excited to have a part-time youth minister on staff to work with their children and teenagers. And here I was still in Bible college, and they asked me to come and be part of their congregation on the weekends. And I arrived with a number of books to put up in a library that I had there, and I wanted to have a little office, and they were proudly going to show off this new office to me. And when I walked in, I realized very quickly it was actually a converted bathroom. There was still the sink in the corner where the stalls had been. They had basically torn out all the partitions there and put in and took out the toilets and everything and put in bookshelves. It was an office. It was a functional office with a sink. And I turned around and I said to the pastor, I said, "This is a toilet and this is a bathroom, a restroom." And he laughed. He said, "Yes, but it's very biblical." I said, "Biblical? How?" And he said, "First, second, third John." And we got a good laugh out of that. But I got to tell you, that's what's cool about the smaller church. We have these facilities, and again, we see the obstacles of them, and the restraints, but they have a lot of wonderful opportunities as well. So when it comes to all of this, here's what I want you to capture for a moment. I want you to think about your context. I want you to think like Walgreens, not like Walmart. You know, the big box churches out there, they are the Walmarts of our church culture. And so many times we go to conferences and we get the books and we do these resources and we hear from these wonderful people and they got great big ministries. But it's like David trying to wear Saul's armor. It just doesn't fit us because we're in a smaller context. And if we're going to slay those giants, we're going to need to rely upon what works for us, what's always worked for us. And like David, he didn't need Saul's armor to go against Goliath. What he needed was just his sling and a few smooth stones from the creek bed. And that's what we need to think about. And I always say, think like Walgreens, not Walmart. Do you realize a few years ago, Walmart was basically the giant when it came to retail and such? But Walgreens was just a corner grocery store, pharmaceutical. It was a pharmacy. And they were trying to reinvent and reproduce. And so they decided what they were going to do was become very contextualized to the individual neighborhoods. Walmart was building out on the edge of town, and they were building these big facilities, and people had to go out to them. Walgreens said, "We're not going to do that. We're going to build to the neighborhood." And you're looking at a picture here of, I think it's in downtown Chicago, a Walgreens there. And, you know, it's totally contextualized to the neighborhood. And they sell only what the neighborhood needs. Out here in Boise, Idaho, where I live, you can get inner tubes for floating the river at your local Walgreens. It's because they know what we need. And that's what I want you to think about. What can you do to be contextualized to your neighborhood? What do your neighbors need? What do your neighborhood children need? That's your Jerusalem. That's where you need to go first. That's your first target area, are those homes right around your church. Now, let me give you some help here when it comes to creating environments in the smaller congregation. And this is something that we can talk about later when we get together. I just want to introduce it to you. All right? Just want to briefly give you a general concept. And if you're interested in knowing more about this, feel free to write me, or you can download the book, Energizing Children's Ministry in the Smaller Church, a book that I wrote for Standard Publishing. That's available at my website for free. It's out of print now, and the publisher has given me the opportunity just to put it up there in a download, PDF download. Feel free to download that at manasolutions.org. Great resource for you. But here's what I want you to capture. You know, when you're hungry, your stomach growls. And deep inside each and every human being and each and every child in your ministry, there are growls. There are 6 human needs that need to be met. These are deep needs. And when we meet these needs, children, teenagers, and adults, but in this case, we're talking about children's ministry, children are naturally attracted to what we're doing. They are not only naturally attracted, but once they engage, they then are naturally, it becomes very sticky. The environment is sticky. And so I want to just briefly share with you these 6 environments and introduce them to you. First of all, the G in growls, just think growls. Your stomach growls. These 6 needs are an acronym. The G, grace. Grace. You know, we need to be more organic in our approach. And I to set the metaphor here, I want you also to think about being more of a garden, being more of an organism, being more of a gardener rather than a trip planner, rather than an organizer. So when you think about tending a garden, you kind of do that in small ways, do you not? You tend to plant and garden and nurse it and and fertilize and do all that in much more smaller organic ways. It's the same thing in ministry. You need to create a garden of grace. A garden of grace is a place where there's unconditional spaces and there's unbelievable surprise. It's a place of blessing. And this is one of the problems that we have in children's ministry today. And I'll probably step on some toes when I say this, but we've got captured by this idea that we have to use bribery to get children to do what we want them to do. We have to use Bible bucks and candy bars and prizes and other things like that in order to get the kids to come, to attend, and to be involved. But I want to challenge you. I think that's a dangerous thing to do. First of all, whenever we attach bribery or these type of rewards, incentives to spiritual practices, I think we set up children for later failure and misunderstanding as far as what church is about and what the spiritual life is about. It's one of the reasons why I think the millennials right now are exiting the church in record numbers. They were raised on this type of stuff when they were children. Garden of Grace does the opposite. I'm not saying you can the candy. I'm saying that you don't make candy the reason you do something. If you want to bring a boatload of Snickers one morning and the kids, they're having a great time, and at the end you say, listen, I got a bunch of candy here. I just want to share with you. Here you go. Give them a bunch of Snickers. You don't have to can the candy. Candy can still be a fun part of children's ministry, but it's not a reason. You don't earn it. You don't get something. You don't earn that candy. See the difference? And creating a garden of grace, creating a space where you can make mistakes and still be okay. That's grace. So what would grace look like or sound like in a smaller church children's ministry? Those are things you can think about. Because when you have grace, when that grace is expressed, the core need becomes freedom. Children feel free to be who they really are. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I love it when my children in my ministries finally are free to be who God has designed them to be. They can make a mistake and it's okay. They can mess up on the memory verse and it's not going to cost them because I'm looking at how they're growing in the Lord. Secondly, the R in growls is relationship. A garden of grace is rooted to connect and to collaborate and commune. And what this basically means is that children matter and their parents matter and the volunteers matter. I mean, it's all rooted to a relationship. Adam and Eve, where God built Adam and Eve for relationship. And if you don't belong, it's so long. And a lot of kids are checking out at 6th grade now or 5th grade when they leave our children's ministries because we're not connecting them. We bring them in and we give them a nice entertaining moment. We treat them to some fun and some edutaining type of things. But the bottom line is we're not connecting them to each other or to us in a discipleship format, in a discipleship space. So how can you create better friendships in every service you do, every event, every activity? Those are things to be thinking about. Another thing to consider, actually, when you do that, let me hit upon the core need. When you express this core need, it creates love. And when you love to be part of a loving children's ministry where the kids not only love each other, but they love you and they're learning to love others, that's ministry. That's the type of church that I grew up in. Maybe it's the type of church you grew up in too. The O is ownership. Basically, deep down, we're all control freaks at heart. We all want to be large and in charge, and your children are no different. And one of the things I see a lot in children's ministry today is we like to control. We like to go from the top down. We want to be the ones in charge. But if you can start to release children, give them some ownership of what they're doing, give them ownership of the lessons, give them some ownership in the activities, give them some ownership in the service that you do. You know, a garden of grace is pruned by empowering choice, control, and contribution. For example, choice. You don't need to give preschoolers a bunch of choices. Just give them 2 choices. Give them A or B. You want to stay inside or you want to go outside? Do you want to stand up or do you want to sit down? Giving choices empowers and unleashes this ownership within children. As they get older, maybe preteen, you can start to add in a 3rd choice, A, B, or C. And this teaches them how to make wise choices. not just choices that are popular, but the best choice in the best situation. And that's part of our work. You see, when we do that, we create competence within a child. They become competent to actually perform, learn a skill, do a skill. They feel competent in what they're performing. The O, or the W, I mean, is worth. Worth. This is about dignity. This is about building a child's value, giving them a vision for ministry, giving them a voice in the ministry. This comes back to affirmation, encouragement, but a lot of children today never hear positive, powerful, personal statements about their lives, about who they are personally, and they need to do that. They need to hear that they matter. They need to hear that they can make a difference. They need to hear that they can do the work. They can handle the job. You see, when you do that, you start to give competence to a child. Competence, that core need of competence starts to emerge. Now, I want you just to think about this for a moment, because this is exciting. If you do nothing more than focus on creating environments of grace, relationship, ownership, and worth, GROW, what's that spell? Grow. You literally are growing your children. Not just, maybe in number, you may have more children start to come, but you're growing them spiritually, you're growing them emotionally, you're growing them mentally, you're growing them spiritually. All these different ways that we need to grow a child. GROW. I call those the power needs that every human has. But there are two primitive needs, and I'll end with these. And the first primitive need, the L in growls, is laughter. We need to fertilize all of our programs, all of our activities, all of our lessons with laughter. Laughter's not bad. In fact, smiles for miles, yeah, you go further on a smile. You go much further when you're enjoying the task. A garden of grace fertilizes every environment with moments of enjoyment and, yes, entertainment. There's nothing wrong with being entertaining in our teaching. In fact, I think it's critical in an entertainment culture that we use these bridges to build into children's lives. Because when we do that, we create joy. Children today want to express their joy. They're happy. Deep down, children are naturally happy. A baby is naturally happy, except when it's hungry, except when it's got a need, it's afraid or something like that. For the most part, a baby is a happy baby. And children are that way as well. Last but not least, S in growls is security. This is another primitive need. This primitive need is that, we need to create some boundaries that foster physical and emotional security. I want you to think just briefly about your children's ministry, the facilities, the programs that you do, how you carry them out. How safe are they? How secure are they? Now, this is critical if you're trying to attract and bring new families into your congregation, because I'll guarantee you, parents will not put their children into a ministry that's not safe. And I've always said, your nursery is the most important place to put your children, or to put your emphasis, to put your money, to put your priorities. Make your children's nursery, a prime area of focus and priority. Because when you do that, you create comfort. Children today need comfort. They need to be in comfortable environments, and it's a huge need. And when you scratch that niche, and when you scratch that need, it's amazing to watch them come. So that's basically it. Grace, relationship, ownership, worth, laughter, and security. Those are the 6 environments for a thriving, smaller church children's ministry. Sean, I think we're ready to talk.
Wow, thank you for all of that, Rick. That was excellent. Most of the folks who are watching tonight are from small churches, and I think that you definitely touched on some of the obstacles and challenges and opportunities that they have. So thank you again for that presentation. Well, we do have a few questions that have come in. So why don't we ask a few of these and see what advice you have for us. Many times, those who serve in ministry at a small church have to work other jobs. So what advice might you have for those who are already trying to balance and juggle so much and serve their small church as well?
Yeah, I'm a volunteer. I work. I'm not paid. I'm not on any staff. I don't get paid by my church, and I volunteer as well. And it's always interesting to me that one of the advantages that the larger church has is they can specialize you a little bit more. You can kind of focus more on preschool ministry or young children or just Sunday school or Wednesday night, and that is your primary area. In the smaller church, I think part of it is we feel called. If you feel called to children, you're going to want to be involved with children as much as possible. So it becomes important for me as the leader over the whole volunteer staff to limit what that looks like. One of the ways that I did that myself was my staff only served 9 months out of the year. Even in the smallest church I was in, I gave them the summers off. I said, you're on for me from September to May, but from June to July, you're off. I also gave them December off. I mean, December is a very busy month for many people, and they just got so many things going on, office parties and Christmas parties and, school programs, and it's just jam-packed. And all we do as a church is we just add on to that with our own activities. So I did a skeleton staff. I kind of, brought the ministry down during the month of December. We did just, Sunday school. Wednesday nights were a little bit different. And so it created it allowed me to have a different, I call it my skeletal staff. Usually what I did, and I'll be honest, where I got my staff for the summer and for December was from my teenagers. I found a lot of teenagers in my church were looking for places to serve. And so I recruited them to be my skeletal staff, my backup staff. And by giving rest, I allowed my staffers, then my regular staff, to be much more engaged in those months when I needed them.
Excellent. That's a great idea. I serve in a larger church right now. Most of my experience has been in smaller churches. But even in our larger church, we have tried to work in those opportunities for folks to get rest and to take a break, as most of them are volunteers. And so I think that is important. That's great advice. So what advice do you have for those of us who are in smaller churches, but we feel like children's ministry is not valued or given very much of a priority by our pastors?
Yeah, been there, done that one as well. This is difficult because if your pastor is not connected to the children's ministry, if he is not seeing what's going on in your children's ministry, he's not going to promote it. He's not going to support it. In those meetings where money is being divvied up for various ministries, he's not going to back you. So one of the things that I learned very early in ministry, and it was interesting, the larger the church got, the less I could do this with my pastors, but the smaller church I could, was that I found certain times of the year, I found certain moments during the year or even during the month where I could bring my pastor in before the children. And I kept saying to my pastors, my senior guys and my preaching guys, my preachers, I said, listen, these children are going to be your church in about 5 years. Because we didn't have a junior high ministry or high school ministry on Sunday morning. Children's church ended at 5th or 6th grade. So these kids are going to be in here. So one of the things we did was we had family Sundays. The first Sunday of every month, we didn't do children's church. I wanted those children in church with their families. And I wanted my preacher to kind of start building a relationship with these kids and to learn how to speak to children. The other thing that I would do, and this is key, in my case, I worked with elderships. And a lot of my elders, church elders, they were available as well. And so on Sunday morning, like during children's church, I use my elders. In my tribe, we have communion. We do the Lord's Supper every single Sunday. And so that became a wonderful way for my eldership to come in every single Sunday, give a brief communion devotion. And they love to practice on the children because they figure if they could do it with children, they could do it with adults. And it was wonderful. But they come in, they do a communion devotion, and then they distribute the communion emblems. And that was a way of getting the elders involved. The more you can get the elders involved and the pastor involved, the better. I had a church camp, children's church camp, I invited my pastor to come along for that. And he, to my surprise, said yes. There are just a lot of different activities and opportunities. And a lot of times they don't come because we don't ask them. So I would say, first of all, build that relationship with your pastor. Start asking them to be connected in a very real way to your ministry. Let them see what you're doing and show them that children are making a difference and they are a part of the church of today. We often talk about the children are the church of today, not just the church of tomorrow, but our behaviors, the way we program, and even our pastoral decisions tend to go against that idea. Get the pastors involved. And it starts with you. I mean, they're waiting for an invitation a lot of times.
Wow, I love that. Absolutely true. Well, one more question, and you kind of touched on this probably, but we do occasionally have pastors who watch these webinars. So what is something that you might say to the pastor of the small church who's watching? Maybe what's one key takeaway or one word of advice or one thing you want to say as an advocate for children's ministry to those pastors?
Well, first of all, if you're a pastor listening in, thank you for even taking the time to watch this webinar. It shows that you have an understanding, a desire, and a passion to see children more involved in your congregation. And you don't have to be a young guy to get passionate about children's ministry. In fact, some of my best senior guys, my preaching guys, preachers, pastors that were involved in children's ministry were older. They just recognized that for them, children's ministry had to be part of the church context, and it had to be part of the story. And that's what I would encourage you to think about. How are children part of your story now? And I would just encourage you, if you're a pastor, to do what I was just talking about. If your children's volunteers or if your children's ministry leaders aren't reaching out to you, then you reach out to them. You go visit their Wednesday night program. If you can dip in and check out Sunday school, watch what's going on in Sunday school. Make yourself available. Go to children's church for a couple minutes. If you can be involved in children's church. I had one pastor that every single Sunday he came down because he wasn't needed to be up on the stage for the first half of the time because they were doing worship upstairs. He came down to the children's ministry and stopped into children's church and introduced himself to all the children every week, read the passage of scripture that we're going to be dealing with that day, and basically said a prayer. He introduced the whole children's church. And I was like, wow, do something like that. Be involved, because children have a place. Children matter, and children need to be blessed by you and the ministry that you're doing as a whole. And so I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you if you're listening in, and thank you for your ministry in the smaller church and to these children.
I want to repeat what Rick said. Yes, pastors, thank you. Those of you who are watching for being a part of this webinar, and no doubt you find and have placed some priority in children's ministry. So again, I repeat what Rick said. And thank you, Rick. Thank you again for being with us tonight. Thank you for your ministry, your passion. Yeah. And again, personally, I am so grateful for your influence in my own ministry. So thanks again for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for buying my book.
All right, sure thing. Well, our first giveaway this evening is actually Dr. Chromey's book, which is no longer available. So this is a very prized drawing, Energizing Children's Ministry in the Smaller Church. If you would like to be entered into this giveaway, please visit our website and complete the registration form for tonight's event before the end of this webinar. Our winner will be announced this evening on our social media pages. And if you don't win, go to Rick's website. He shared with us that you are able to download this resource there and print it off for yourself. After this brief message, Joy Hensley will be back with us to introduce our next speaker, who is John Tasch.
Incredible wonders are springing to life. us tonight for our Children's Ministries webinar is John Tasch. John joined us at ICM in 2009, and he is also joining us again this year as one of our guest presenters. We are excited to have him back to share many of his creative ideas. John has over 40 years of experience in ministry to children and the entire family. He has a wealth of experience in many areas, including training church leaders, ministry consulting, mentoring teenage interns, and facilitating and leading short-term missions. His ministry has taken over 6,000 children, youth, and adults on short-term mission trips. God has given him a tremendous amount of energetic and wonderfully creative ideas on how to present the Word of God through exciting, high-impact teaching techniques and time-tested methods that will keep you on the edge of your seats. John's love for God and unending enthusiasm will inspire you to become excitedly committed to do as much as you can to bring in the harvest for the kingdom of God. John is sharing today on developing a dynamic leadership team. Welcome, John, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joy, and it is a delight to share one of my favorite topics, developing a dynamic leadership team. For 45 years now, my wife have been ministering to children and youth. We could not do what we do without a team of passionate, dedicated people. We had 300 volunteers, actually over 300 volunteers that worked with us in our ministry. 1,500 children that we bussed in for our Saturday Sunday school, and then another 1,500 children that came on Sunday morning for Sunday morning services. And again, this topic is dear to my heart. You cannot do what you are called to do. God has not called you to be a lone ranger. You need a team of passionate, dedicated people. So discover how you can create a team of passionate, dedicated people that moves your ministry from regression to progression and multiplication. You say, well, I'm just a low energy person. No. There's no such thing as a low energy person. You just lack passion. And the people that you want to be part of your team, you want to have people of energy and life. And it leads me to the Proverbs 27:17, a very familiar scripture, which we've heard all our life, where it says, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Joey, I'm going to ask you to come back on the set if you would, please, because this is how I've always seen this and heard this verse illustrated. You know, you've got rough edges, I've got some rough edges, but the more we rub shoulders with each other, your rough edges and my rough edges, pretty soon they'll become smooth. That verse has nothing to do with your rough edges and my rough edges, but it has everything to do what takes place when we come in contact with one another. Thank you, Joy. So, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. That word sharpeneth in the Hebrew language means to respond with enthusiasm. The word enthusiasm comes from a Greek word, entheo, which means full of God. Isn't that great? To be around a person with entheo, with enthusiasm. Those are the type of people that you want. The word sharpeneth again means to respond with enthusiasm, to incite, to stimulate. So what is produced in your notes? What is produced when iron comes in contact with iron? Joey, come back on the set again. Okay, let's say you have a piece of iron in your hand, and I have a piece of iron in my hand. What is produced when those two pieces of iron come in contact with each other? Sparks, energy, life. What should take place when people come in contact with each other. Let's say you walk in church on Sunday morning, you walk into the lobby. What should be happening? Instead of, oh, another Sunday, I've got to teach those kids. No, what should be happening is sparks, energy, life. Thank you, Joy. So iron sharpens iron. What is produced when iron comes in contact? When iron comes in contact with each other, sparks, energy, life. What should be produced when we come in contact with one another? Sparks, energy, life, creativity. You know, we find this when we read Luke chapter 1, verse 39 through 49. We often talk about this story at Christmas time when Mary, who was pregnant with Jesus, went to Elizabeth's house. Now, Elizabeth at this time, she was 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist. Now, theologians write, as Mary went to Elizabeth's house, she made a salutation. Well, the King James Version, let me just paraphrase it. She probably knocked at Elizabeth's door and said, Elizabeth, it's Mary, are you home? What does the Bible say took place on the inside of Elizabeth? The Bible says the baby leaped. Well, theologians write that Elizabeth, who was old, we don't know how old she was, but she was old, and she was carrying John the Baptist, 6 months pregnant. But here's the thing. Theologians write that Elizabeth did not feel any kicking for a long time. She thought the baby that she was carrying was dead because she felt no movement. She felt no kicking on the inside of her. But when Mary came into her house and began to speak to Elizabeth, the Bible says the baby on the inside of her leaped. It wasn't just, oh, I felt the baby on the inside leaping. No, it was the baby that I thought was dead is still alive. What should be taking place when we come in contact with one another? The baby on the inside of us should begin to leap. Energy, life, creativity. Are you getting this? We see the same in the New Testament in Mark chapter 5, verse 25 through 34. When here is a woman with an issue of blood. The Bible says for many years, for 12 years, she went to every doctor, she went to every hospital, and the Bible says she spent all that she had. She said, if I can just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, if I can just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, I know I'm going to be made whole. So the Bible says she pressed through the crowd. And when she got to Jesus, she reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. And what does the Bible say happened? Mark chapter 5. Jesus felt virtue flowing out of him. He felt life. He felt the power that was on the inside of him leave and go into her. Jesus turned around and he said, who touched me? The disciples kind of laughed and they said, Jesus, there's all sorts of people touching you. But Jesus said, someone touched me by faith. I felt life. I felt energy. I felt passion. And that's exactly what should be taking place. Those are the type of people, are you listening? Those are the type of people that you want involved in your ministry, working and ministering to your children. You want to develop a dynamic leadership team. People that are thinkers, people that have energy, people that have life, people that have passion. I know I said this before. You know, people say, well, I'm just a low energy person. No such thing. You just lack passion. See the typical person on Sunday morning during praise and worship? Standing there like a bump on a log, but getting them home watching the football game Sunday afternoon. Hello? Great example, isn't it? Those are the type of people that you want, people with energy, life, and creativity. Amen? Now, make a difference, people. Make a difference, people. Number one, encourage me. I want to be around make a difference people. Number one, make a difference people. In your notes, they lift me higher. Ooh, I'm around these type of people. I walk away a better person. I walk away when I first met it was down, but I'm a better person now. They lift me higher. Make a difference people. Expand me. They make me bigger. Make a difference people. Encourage me. They draw me nearer. I want to have more. I want to experience more of God. Make a difference people. They empower me. They make me better. These are the type of people that you want to be part of your leadership team. People that make a difference. I call this the human team machine. If you have a team of passionate, dedicated people, you have an endless source of brilliant ideas. If you have, I'm going to say it again, if you have a team of passionate, dedicated people, you have an endless source of brilliant ideas. And in your notes, fill in the blank, people and ideas are a ministry's greatest asset. Notice I did not say people and money. It's people and ideas. Do you know, children's leader, you are an idea away from greatness. You are an idea away from success. That's all you need is a brilliant idea. And it might not come from you, but it's going to come from the leaders that you surround yourself with. In your notes, how do godly leaders think? Number one, godly leaders think big. They realize God's vision is bigger than theirs. Number two, how do godly leaders think? They think other people. God has not called you to do what you do by yourself. No such thing as a lone ranger in ministry. You're going to wear yourself out unless you get yourself a team of dedicated, passionate, energetic people. How do godly leaders think? Number one, again, they think big. They realize God's vision is bigger than them. Number two, how do godly leaders think? They think other people. They always include others. How do godly leaders think? Number three, they think continually. They're not satisfied with today's success. How do godly leaders think? Number four, bottom line, they want to see fruit and results. How do godly leaders think? Number five, they think continual growth. They want to keep improving. And let me just share this. For every event, for every service that you do, you need to ask yourself two very important questions. And don't just ask yourself, get a group of your think tank people, 2 or 3 or 4 people. After you had your event, after you had your service, question number 1 you should ask is, what did we do right? What went well? Number 2, what can we do better? Because we don't want to make the same mistake next time. We don't want to make the same mistake next week. So, what do? You evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. First question, what went well? Number 2 is, what can we do better? Next in your notes, are people drawn to you? Charisma is the ability to draw people to you. Are people attracted to you? If not, it could be because you possess one of these roadblocks. Number 1, pride. No one will follow a leader who thinks he is better than everyone else. Oh, that's so important. Number 2, One of the roadblocks of leadership, insecurity. If you are uncomfortable with who you are, others will be too. Another roadblock, number 3, is moodiness. If people never know what to expect from you, they stop expecting anything. And number 4, perfectionism. People respect the desire for excellence but dread unrealistic expectations. And number 5, cynicism. People don't want to be afraid when they get around you. I'm going to repeat all 5 of those. Are people drawn to you as a leader? One of the roadblocks is pride. 2, insecurity. 3, moodiness. 4, perfectionism. And number 5, cynicism. In your notes, a leader's most important words. 5 most important words. You did a great job. Thank you so much. We could not do what we do without you. 5 simple words. You did a great job. The 4 most important words as a leader. What do you think? See, people support what they help create. Let me say that again. People support what they help create. If they have a part of creating something good, they'll stay with you. You want those type of people on your team. Number 3, a leader's most important words. 3, I was wrong. As a leader, it's okay to say, I was wrong. Yeah. Number 2, most important words, thank you. And number 1, one most important word is we. True story. Every year up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, they have what they call they have a horse pull to see who can pull the most weight. The horse that came in first place this past year pulled over 9,000 pounds. One horse came in first place, pulled by itself over 9,000 pounds. The horse that came in second place pulled just under 9,000 pounds. The 2 owners of those horses decide, well, let's give the fans here, just kind of a surprise. So they put both horses together to see how many pounds both of those horses could pull. And to everyone's amazement, those 2 horses pulled over 28,000 pounds. Wow. That's the power of teamwork. Amen? How to move your ministry from regression to multiplication. Number 1, the wrong person in the right place. Let me say that over. The wrong person in the wrong place equals regression. Maybe you've had those type of people on your team, okay? The wrong person in the wrong place is regression. The wrong person in the right place, the wrong person in the right place, in other words, the job needs to be done, but the person's not doing it. What does that produce? Frustration. In your notes, the right person in the wrong place. In other words, you have a gifted person, but the job's not getting done. So what do you have? You have the right person in the wrong place. It's confusion. The right person in the right place is progression. And the right people in the right place equals multiplication. So, how are you going to create a team of passionate, dedicated, loyal people that moves your ministry from regression to multiplication? You pick the people that are passionate. You pick the people. You know, one of the greatest things that I like to find people that are teachable. You give me a teachable person. Leaders, you know what I'm talking about. You give me a teachable person and we will go places. A person that, that is teachable, a person that says, tell me what I need to do. But then a person that not only you tell them what to do, they say, I'll go for it. A person that you don't need to be there all the time pushing them. You want a person that says, whoa. Little saying that I learned years ago, it's easier to put out a fire than it is to stop an iceberg. Let me say that again. It's easier to put out a fire than to stop an iceberg. You give me a person that's got some energy, some fire on the inside of them, some energy and passion, we'll go places. Thank you so much. Developing a dynamic leadership team. And if you've got any questions, give us a call.
Hey, John, thanks so much. We really loved having you here tonight,
Thank you.
sharing with us. What great insight and tips that you shared. So no matter the size of our church, all of us, we all need a great team to effectively minister. But before we let you go, John, we have a few questions that we wanted to ask. So first of all, as you know, ministry can be very busy and overwhelming. Sometimes the only time we see our volunteers is when we have contact with them is on Sunday mornings when there's ministry going on and we're too busy to even stop and have a conversation. So our question is, what are some ways that we can intentionally carve out time to check on them and even provide soul care to them?
Great question. A hug, a handshake, a thank you, a card. Take them out to coffee. Keep in mind that your job description, leader, that your job description is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Another word for shepherd is pastor. You can put your name in there.
Yeah.
The children, you might have 20 children, you might 200 children. You are their shepherd, you are their pastor. And you lead them beside still waters. You restore their soul. See, when the children come in, they should look at you as, wow. You restore their soul, their mind, their emotions, their will. And even though they're walking through the valley of the shadow, they don't have to fear. Why? You are with them. You are their pastor. And this is what you've got to do with your leaders. You are pastoring your leaders. By the way, your first ministry is not to the children. Leaders, remember that. Your first ministry is not to your children. Your first ministry is to your leaders. It's to your team. Because you cannot do this by yourself. So when you are reaching out to your team, then your team can reach out to your children.
Great answer, John. Many of us, as you know, we lead children's ministries at small churches where the volunteer pool can sometimes feel a little shallow. So how do we recruit and staff our ministries when it seems like people already have so many responsibilities?
Great question. The thing that I'm seeing in children's and youth ministry, specifically in children's and youth ministry, as I travel across the nation, we've been to 26 different nations, is we always see when, in churches a lot of times, when they're wanting more volunteers, what's the first thing you see when you walk into the lobby of the church and you open up your bulletin? Big, bold letters, help wanted in the children's ministry. Leaders, put away your help wanted sign. Get rid of the help wanted sign, because my wife and I love going to restaurants, but if I see a help wanted sign out in front of that restaurant, guess what? I drive right by.
Yeah.
Why? Because the first thing I think of is bad service and bad food. Help wanted, we need help. Leaders, stop begging your church membership for help. Get rid of the help wanted sign. You ready for this? Get rid of the help wanted sign and put now hiring. Makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It does.
What do you think of when you see the sign now hiring? You think of potential. You think Now there is an opportunity to succeed. So now hiring. We are hiring dedicated, faithful, committed people to work with the greatest harvest field in the world today. That is our children. Amen?
That's great. Amen. All right, so thank you, John, for taking
you.
time out to come and be with us tonight and for sharing on our CM Live webinar.
It is truly my honor to present our final speaker for this evening. Last year I had the privilege of sitting with thousands of children's ministry leaders for a conference. And as we gathered for a time of prayer, our presenter took the stage and delivered just a few simple words concerning God's power and care for us. The words that she shared were so impactful that I spent the following weeks reflecting on them daily. I texted several of my friends and said, "You have got to look this lady up. Her name is Beth Guckenberger." Several had heard of her. I had not before. But I was so excited that as I prayed about this year's webinar presenters, I knew that I had to reach out to her. And I'm grateful she said yes. And she's here for our first webinar of this new year. Beth and her husband Todd live with their family in Cincinnati, Ohio, where they serve as co-executive directors of Back-to-Back Ministries. After graduating from Indiana University, the Guckenbergers moved to Monterrey, Mexico, where they lived for 15 years. Between biological, foster, and adopted children, they have raised 10 children. Beth is the author of 9 books, including adult and children's titles. She travels and speaks regularly at conferences, youth gatherings, and church services. Beth often shares powerfully as a storyteller, and she draws from her vast experience as a missionary, Bible teacher, and a parent for illustrations of biblical concepts. Again, it's truly my honor to welcome to our CM Live webinar this evening, Beth Guckenberger. Welcome, Beth.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
I was
for
listening to
joining us.
that bio. Yeah, and you said that she and her husband have raised 10 children. I was thinking, I think that verb is in present tense. We are still actively raising 10 children. And I'm not sure that job is ever done. Yes, I should have said.
Sure. And,
Yeah.
you know, I know that you draw a lot of your material from your experiences with your family and kids. God's truly been
Sure.
powerful and done some wonderful things with you and your kids. So I'm excited for everyone to connect with you this evening. So thanks again for being here.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to talk about this particular subject, this idea of engaging kids around the world with what it is that might be laid on their heart. I think God breaks off pieces of his heart and deposits it into to all of us, regardless of our ages, and getting kids engaged and awakened to how God might want to use them in their own houses, in their own communities, in their own soccer teams and classrooms, but also in places across the world. It's been a passion of mine for a long time. So I'm really pretty much a storyteller, Sean. And so what I want to do is tell your audience a couple stories about ways in which I've seen kids engage and what's resulted in their life afterwards, and the adults that help cultivate that in a way that was meaningful and age appropriate for them. So I think the first story really for me, one of the first ways in which God surprised me about what God could do through kids was I was living in Mexico as a missionary. And at the end of a week-long mission trip, I would challenge the families that were there visiting with us to think about what it was that they were good at and how God might want to use that. And I remember I was giving this little talk about he can do anything with whatever it is that we offer him. And this boy was in the front row. He was 10 years old. And he said, he raised his hand. He's like, I'm not really that good at anything. Can I please be excused? And I said, oh, I'm sure you're good at something. And I said, no, you need to stay here. Just ask God, what are you good at? And he's like, I mean, I'm really just good at Xbox. I said, okay, well, ask the Lord what he might be able to do with your Xbox. And he kind of sat in the front row for the rest of my time sharing with him. And then I had kind of forgotten about our exchange. Several weeks later, maybe 7 or 8 weeks later, I got a letter in our home mission office in Ohio. And it was a letter that included in it had a cashier's check for $410 and a note from this young man that said he went back to his Indiana elementary school and he hosted an Xbox tournament with a $10 entry fee. And he got some local businesses to donate prizes for the top performers. And he had 41 participants. So he sent this cashier's check for $410 to us. And he told me exactly how it is that he wanted to use it. And at the end of it, he goes, look what God was able to do with an Xbox. And I remember being so excited, not only for what the dollars that he had raised were going to be able to do for kids in the community he had seen had need, but really what was God going to do with a young man that decided he was take whatever it was that was in his hand and surrender it to God and watch God do something exciting with it. And that awakening, that started some thinking in my mind, because I think I just going to confess to you that I used to think of the givers and the goers in any kind of service opportunity, whether they were giving and going to something locally or giving and going to something globally, as means to an end. Like whatever it is or whatever population they were serving was the center of the bullseye, and we just needed to use the giver and goer to get there. But I remember like just having this big aha moment when I got that letter from that young man, Ben, and I thought, gosh, Jesus, you love that goer and that giver as absolutely as much as you love the kids who will be the recipient of his funds. Your ministry footprint isn't just so we would have eyes to see others for the sake of the others. Your heart is for all of us in the world to exchange and to engage with one another. And so I started to think about some of my own kids and certainly some of the kids that we were serving alongside. And I was thinking, if I make their world all about them, if I make sure that they have the right, practices and shoes and experiences and opportunities, and if I make their world all about them, at the end of 18 years of that, do I have any hope that, they're going to be other centered and mission minded? Probably not. When I was first a missionary, I don't do this anymore, but when I was first a missionary and the mission teams would come visit us, I used to make all of their lunches, which was pretty much peanut butter and jellies. And I have this really strong memory of one time standing around a kitchen island, and there were about 30 high school kids on a mission trip, and they were shouting out to me their like individual peanut butter and jelly orders, like, hey, I don't do crunchy peanut butter, and I don't like wheat bread, and I don't like chunks in my fruit, and I don't even like jelly. And I can remember making those sandwiches, thinking to myself the way you do before you have children, like one day when I have kids, they're going to eat peanut butter and jelly any way that somebody's going to make it for them. And so with that silly little goal in mind, the next year when we started our family, and ever since then, for the last 20 years, whenever I go to the grocery store, one week I buy wheat bread, and one week I buy white bread, and one week I buy crunchy peanut butter, and one week I buy creamy peanut butter, and one week I have, jelly, and some weeks jam, and some weeks nothing at all. And the goal was something as silly as I wanted them one day to be able to eat any kind of combination of peanut butter and jelly that it was ever offered to them anywhere. So I reverse engineered my choices with that ultimate goal in mind. And the same thing is true if we want young men and women that believe they have something to offer the world, and they have something in common with the world and people whose lives don't look anything like theirs. If that's what we want at the end of their childhood, then we need to reverse engineer some of our choices and make sure today we're doing things week in and week out that reinforce those kind of perspectives. When I think about adult engagement in missions or in service, the two biggest barriers that keep adults from engaging in the world is they think to themselves, I don't really have anything to offer. I mean, I don't speak a language, or I'm not handy, or I'm not good with kids, or I don't know how to answer their questions, or I'm whatever reason they count themselves out. They think they don't have anything to offer, or they think they don't have anything in common. Like, what do I know about whatever that population is that God's starting to call them towards? And it's much easier to sit down and to pull away than it is to engage in what God might have for them. So if we can start interacting with kids at an early age and say, we are so excited about what you have to offer. You have time, you have attention, you have, certain gifts and talents. You have a smile, you have a listening ear. Like what is it that you have in your hand? That's how my story started. I saw at an orphanage some preschool kids that were hiding the food we had brought for them under the mattress. And I thought to myself, what can I do about what it is that I'm seeing? What do I have in my hand? What do I have time? Do I have relationship? Do I have extra resources? And how can I offer those to these people, to these kids that were breaking my heart? If we can give that kind of impression. And it's Andy Stanley that says, do for one what you wish you could do for them all. And there's a verse in Zechariah 4:10 that I really want you to take to heart. It says, do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. Like some of kids' first steps into service or missions, whether it's across the street or across the border, they're gonna be small, and they may not seem strategic, and they might feel like you can think of a better, faster, smarter way to do it or to multiply their effort. But God's looking really for two things. He's looking for their availability. He's looking for their willingness. And then he takes that kind of raw material and he does the multiplication. It's our job to encourage and to fan, in many ways, fan that flame and to teach them about the difference between what we call load and burden. So Galatians chapter 2 verses 2 and 5 says this. Paul says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. And then 3 verses later, he says, for each one of you should carry his own load. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, which one is it, Paul? Are we supposed to carry each other's burdens? Should we teach children to carry each other's burdens? Or should we teach them that each one of them should carry their own load? And if you look in the Greek behind those meanings, the word burden means something that somebody can't push uphill on their own. It's just literally too much for them. And the word load is about the weight of a soldier's backpack, about 35 pounds. And the principle in that passage is we want all people to be able to carry their own load. We're not going to try to strip them of any dignity. We want everyone to co-participate in the life that God's given them. But there might be moments when there's a burden. There's something that they can't push uphill on their own. And that's where the intervention of the church is so critical. That's where we get to teach kids to have eyes to see where God might be asking them to step into one of those stories. And when they step into that story, we have the chance to teach children about how to exchange. I think that one of the things that adults do wrong in service is they have kind of an us and them mentality. Like I'm going to give something to them, but they don't need to give anything to me because I don't want anything that they have to give you. And it kind of sounds good at first, but the truth is it's self-protective, and real healing happens in relationship. That's how people get hurt, is in relationship. So that's how people are healed in relationship. And when we're introducing children to compassionate ideas and to God's compassionate heart for the world, we've got to be careful not to do it through causes and charity, but instead through relationship, to teach them about, instead of, like in my area of expertise in orphan care, instead of teaching them big numbers about how many kids are orphaned or how many kids are in foster care, big sweeping things that might kind of overwhelm them, because how do you put your head around those numbers? Instead, tell them the story about a child who represents the population that you're trying to introduce them to. We've seen kids do some pretty spectacular things. I've watched kids, here are a couple ideas of ways in which I've seen kids engage in opportunities around the world. Like this one, they were really like a kindergarten, first grade class. They got seeds from their Sunday school teacher and they planted these seeds in some dirt and cultivated some from young vegetables and young plants. And after taking care of them for a while, when the plants and the vegetables were healthy enough to sell, they sold them to the church population out in the parking lot. And then they gave that little seed money to start a program that they had been told about their church was getting involved in. And what I like about that process is they literally got their hands dirty. They were given a seed and they actually co-participated with God to create something that they then got to monetize and earn that money in order to share it with something that was that they were taught was important in God's heart. And I like that they were investing in something the church had already decided was a priority for them, so that in that same way, maybe parents and children could have a shared vision for whether your church is interested in clean water, or you're interested in planting churches in unreached nations, or you're interested in orphan care, or whatever it is that breaks the heart of your particular congregation. You can involve your children in a way that's meaningful to them. One church that we had a relationship with, they had a real heart for literacy. And this young fourth grade girl decided to host a book swap where she asked all the kids in the children's ministry to bring 2 books on a particular Sunday. And everybody brought their 2 books and they mixed them all up. And for every 2 books you brought, you were allowed to take 1 book home for free. So that was nice. Everybody got to go home with a new book for them to read on their own, and it didn't cost them anything. But with the remaining books, about 50% of the books that were brought, they sold those for $1 or $2, and they put all those proceeds to go towards a literacy project that somebody was working on in North Africa. And I like the idea that young girl thought about, I love reading and I love books, and I want to help some kids that are in another place in the world have a chance to love the same things I love. But she did it in a way that was meaningful to the other kids in her children's ministry. I thought that was a really creative way, that literacy swap. We watched, there was a church that had a heart for clean water. We were doing some well building in Africa, and some very creative second graders decided that instead of having a lemonade stand the way that they had originally thought they might do, they made a little dirty water stand. So they had clean water that they flavored with a little bit of iced tea powder. So the water looked a little bit dirty, but it was clean for people to drink. They sold that slightly sweetened water at lemonade stands around their community. And when people came up to buy their dirty water, they gave a little piece of paper out telling them about the clean water project that they were investing in, and gave a couple statistics that they had learned about clean water. And I thought that, again, was a really meaningful, creative way for them to be able to do several things at one time, for them to be able to raise funds for the boreholes that they were raising money for. It was a way for them to educate the community. It was a way for them to physically get their own hands involved in a solution. And it's just a super creative idea. I've watched kids host movie nights. So these are, there was a church where every kid was supposed to host a movie night in their own community, and they could pick from one of these pre-approved movies that the children's pastor had selected. Then and I think they had like maybe $1 admission to their movie night at their house, and they served popcorn and some things like that. And then halfway through the movie, they had an intermission. And when they paused the movie for the intermission, these kids got up and shared with the kids in their community the orphan care project that they were wanting to invest in. And they said, we just want you to know there are kids around the world, and the money that you've spent tonight to get in and the money you've spent tonight for the popcorn is going to go towards this project. And again, I think the Lord does more than one thing at a time. He certainly raised some money that will go towards a project with kids that really need it, but he also gave a chance for kids to share passionately with their peers about something that was important to them. They were inspirational and educational, and on top of all that, they raised some money. And I think, again, those were some adults who could have thought of maybe ways that could have been smarter, bigger, faster, better, but instead they just came alongside and breathed life into the ideas the kids came up with, and watched those kids believe that they have something to offer. One thing that we use a lot in orphanages around the world are weighted blankets. There's a lot of great research out about weighted blankets and what they do to promote sleep and reduce anxiety. And feel free to look it up later if you're interested. But weighted blankets are very expensive. And so there was one junior high ministry that decided, they got on Pinterest and got all crafty, and they learned how to turn regular blankets into weighted blankets. So they did a blanket drive in their church, and they got people involved in it. They told them a little bit about what weighted blankets do and some of the challenges that kids face who are growing up in children's homes. And then they had like a 24-hour lock-in, and they spent that time in that little craft project working in with those weighted blankets. And again, they did more than one thing at a time. They got their church involved. They had fellowship. They made an effective outreach tool. They invited their friends to get involved, maybe some of them who didn't know who the Lord was, and got to see people who say they are Jesus followers actually doing things to bring peace into the craziness of the world that's around them. And I mean, I could go on and on. I've seen lots of kids come up with really creative ideas, but I think part of what we have to do is make room for kids to have the freedom to think and not be shut down, and to brainstorm off each other, and to listen and listen to the Lord. And then as adults, it's our job to encourage and advocate, and probably do a little bit of driving and cheer them on and document what they're doing, and to remember that the Lord doesn't despise small beginnings. He just rejoices to see the work begin. And that work that we're talking about is the work inside of even their own hearts, as they believe that they have something in them that the Lord wants to offer. And I just think it's important that we remember the messages that we want kids to hear. My husband and I adopted a 12-year-old boy about 4.5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. And during the process of his adoption, it was about an 18-month process between when we met him and when he came home. And the government, where he was in the country where he was living, agreed for us to have Skype dates with him, opportunities for us to begin to build attachment while he was still living in that government institution, as we argued with him how important it was for us to get to know each other as fast as possible because of his advanced age. And about halfway through that 18 months, he got on the screen one night, and he was really sad because he had moved from an 8 to an 11-year-old dorm into a 12 to 18-year-old dorm. And that second dorm was really pretty intimidating. And so at the end of our time together, he didn't want to hang up, and I didn't want to hang up, and I definitely didn't want to hang up with how he was feeling. And so I was saying to him, hey, buddy, do you have some big feelings? This is what I do when I have big feelings. I remind myself of the things I know for sure to be true. And here's some things I know for sure to be true. Like, you're our son, and we're coming for you no matter how long it takes. And God has a plan, and I might not like it, and I might not understand it, but I promise you we can trust it. And I made him repeat that to me. He said those things. I said, just say that back to me. And so he's like, I'm your son, and you're coming for me, and God has a plan, and I can trust it. And then for the next 9 months, until we were able to travel to complete his adoption, that's how we hung up all of those 3-time-a-week Skype dates. We reminded ourselves of the things we knew for sure to be true. Fast forward 9 months later, it was time for us to go into the courtroom and complete the final step of that adoption. And as we walked into that courtroom, he was so excited. He knew he was coming to the United States later that week, and this was the last step, and he could change his name, and he was so excited. But when we walked into that courtroom, he got triggered because the last time he had been into a room like that, a family had fallen apart, not come together. And we continued to work around him, like psychologists and attorneys and social workers testified in court to the adoption proceedings. And Todd, my husband, and I shared. But then finally it got to this point where his name is Tyler. Tyler was going to have to talk to the judge, because the way the law was written in his country, if he wanted to leave that country and come into ours, he was going to need to say with his own mouth that this is what he wanted, testify in open court. But he wasn't talking because he was struggling so much with that environment and his big feelings. And so I was rubbing his back, and I was talking to the judge, and I'm like, hey, do we have any workarounds here? Like, I don't know. I mean, can we clear everybody out of this courtroom? Can he go into your chambers? Can he write it down? I don't know if he's going to talk in this courtroom right now. And the judge is like, I'm sorry, this is the way the law's written. You have to do it in this place, in this way, for this to be completed. And so I started to rub his back, and then all of a sudden his little head popped up. And after a long, long amount of time, he looked at that judge and he said, I'm their son, and they came for me, and God has a plan, and I'm going to trust it. And I told him later that night, that's why we sow truth into our hearts, so that it's ready right there at a moment's notice when we most need it. And later that fall, he would go into an American junior high, and he didn't speak any English, and he was scared out of his mind and having big feelings. And I said to him, hey, listen to me. God has a plan. You don't have to like it. You don't have to understand it, but I promise you can trust it. And he walked into that junior high with that spiritual confidence. And when I think about kids engaging in mission and service, I think about all the ways the enemy is going to want to speak to them things that are lies, like what they're doing isn't making a difference, or that they don't have anything to offer, or they should feel embarrassed or shamed, or I mean, all the ways the enemy works anyway. He wants to work in kids' lives, especially as they begin to exercise muscles in the kingdom of God. And I think it's really important at the same time that we're teaching kids that God wants to use them, we need to teach them how much God loves them and sow into their hearts those truths so that at a moment's notice when they most need it, it's right there at the ready. I'll just finish with this passage in Exodus 33:11. There's this passage where Moses goes into the tent of the meeting, and it says, Joshua, the young son of Nun, follows him up there in that tent of the meeting. And Moses gets the download like he's supposed to, and then he goes back down to tell everybody in God's family what it is the Lord had told him. And it says that the Lord and Moses talked face to face as one would a friend. That's Exodus 33:11. But the last part of that verse says that after Moses leaves and goes down the mountain to do God's work, that Joshua, the young son of Nun, stays behind in the tent of the meeting. And I think that young man followed his mentor into that space and so captivated by what it looked like to be in God's presence. Even though Moses left to go away, Joshua didn't want to do that. And I think that's our role. We've got to take kids into that tent of the meeting and tell them this is what it looks like to be face to face with the Lord, like one would a friend. This is what it looks like to get a download from him, to hear him give us direction and encouragement. And may they be so captivated with that experience, they don't want to leave the tent.
Wow, Beth, thank you so much for that word. And when they have that experience, I think that we see through Scripture and throughout just personal testimonies, when you have that experience, you can't help but want to go and to serve and to do something for him. So thank you. Wow, what a wonderful way to end this webinar tonight. So thank you again for being with us, Beth. We have just a question or two maybe to ask to wrap up our time.
Of course.
And so the first question that we've received from one of our children's ministers is, we do live in a culture that seems very self-centered, self-focused. And how would you suggest that we teach our children how to be more compassionate and more empathetic for people who are in need?
I think that's a great question. I think kids are motivated by story. And what we want to cultivate them is exactly what your question asker was referencing, which is empathy. Not necessarily pity, not necessarily pride on our part, like we have more, they have less, but empathy. What would it feel like to be in that particular story? And what would I want if I was in that story? And so, I can't say it enough, introducing the children in your children's ministry or in your own family to real people, even if those are through stories like on videos on YouTube or through books, but introducing them to real people so that they can not see a cause, but a person. That's the way Jesus sees us.
Sure. Wow. And I think you certainly have a gift for telling stories. As we sat here in the studio, everyone's like, this lady can tell great stories. And that is such an important aspect of what we do. You're absolutely right. As we connect children with truths of the Bible, as well as the reality of the world, we have to connect them. And one of the best ways to do so is through story. One of the other questions that I just wanted to ask you to share for a few moments, if you could, our ministry here out of our international offices has really promoted the Story Weaver series that you have, that you wrote. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that series, how it came to be about, and how we might be able to even use it in engaging kids in mission and service.
Yeah, so those books came about because we were hosting family mission trips, and I was watching when families were serving together on the mission field. God, they were having these unbelievable moments where they were seeing the best in each other, and they were coming together for something outside of themselves, and they were missionally minded, and it was very exciting. And I was like, I wish every family could do this, but that's of course not even practical or real. And so I thought, I want to take some of the stories and experiences that people have on the mission fields where we serve, and I want to bring them into story time at night or around the dinner table or the breakfast table or wherever stories get told in households. And so all the stories in the Story Weaver series are all true stories. They all represent people. The back of it, I think it says something about that, because the dialogue, sometimes I had to fill in some of the dialogue. That's why they get sorted in the fiction column, but they're all true stories. And one of my goals was that they would spur conversations of substance between kids and adults. That's what, I mean, all of us became children's pastors or parents, not to talk about math homework and soccer practice and dirty laundry on the floor. We want to be able to be molders of, and influencers of things like character and direction and leadership and faith. And so I wanted to put together stories that would help kids kind of wrestle with maybe big subjects, but in ways that were meaningful. So there's all kinds of questions that you could ask after each story. And I love getting letters from kids who want to know, like, where's this child now? Or what would that be like to have to share a half a peanut butter and jelly? Or what, it just gives you kind of an excuse to have these important conversations.
Well, thank you. We are actually giving away a couple of copies of these books, and I'll tell folks how they can enter into that drawing in just a few moments. And, Beth, you used a powerful scripture there, and tonight our presenters, I think the scripture about not despising our small beginnings is especially meaningful for this particular webinar. We began tonight with our first speaker talking about children's ministry in small churches. Our second speaker talking about volunteers, how to fulfill our needs and lead our volunteers in small church ministries in particular. And now, of course, you've shared about engaging children in service and mission. And so I wonder, I didn't ask you to do this, but we have children's ministers who will be watching from all over the country and throughout the Caribbean and perhaps other nations beyond. And I wondered if you might just say a prayer for us tonight to conclude this moment of our webinar. Would you mind to do that?
I would love to do that.
Thank you, Beth.
Oh, Jesus, we are so grateful that you do both love us and want to use us, that you care so deeply about who we are and what's in our hand and what we have to offer and what it is that you've sown, what truths you've sown into our hearts. Thank you for the people that have told us the things that are true that we hold on to when we need it. Teach us, Lord, how to give that away as liberally as possible. Teach us what it looks like to be transmitters of the good news to the children in our life. May they hear the excitement in our voice as we talk about who we're passionate about the ways in which you have called us into service and the fruit we've seen in our life as a result of being obedient to that, Lord. May that intergenerational transmission be one of commitment and courage and passion and faithfulness and availability. And may they remember and have the impression that serving God is good, that serving God is important, and that serving God fills our own cup, Lord. Thank you that you always have more than one mission going on at a time. And so thank you for involving us in that mission. Would you, with the power that you give us as co-heirs with your Son, would you release an anointing? Would you release an anointing in the ministries that are represented tonight, that they would feel your power move through them and through the lives of their children out into a world that still needs to know you. And I pray these things in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you can learn more about Beth at her website. That address is on the screen for you. And I did mention that we are giving away our final giveaway of the night are two of Beth's books, Tales of the Not Forgotten and Tales of the Defended Ones. These are, as Beth said, these are real stories that will take you on a journey to faraway lands and unknown faces, and as you travel through their challenges, you see the hand of the great story weaver writing endings that you'd never imagined. These are great resources for your ministry and your home. Again, if you would like to be entered into this giveaway, please visit our website and make sure that you have completed the registration form for this event. Hurry, because you only have a few more minutes to enter. Our winner will be announced at the conclusion of this webinar in just a few moments. Again, I want to say thank you to our presenters this evening. I want to thank Dr. Rick Chromey for his presentation. We want to thank our friend John Tasch and, of course, Beth Guckenberger. And I also want to thank each of you who serve children for being a part of this CM Live webinar. Information about our upcoming webinars coming up over these next few months is available, as well as our other training events at our website, cogop.org/children, and on our Facebook page. Thank you again for being with us this evening. May God bless you.